Hi, I'm Greg from Omen Foils. Today we're going to be going over the pros and cons of the Parawing, what I consider the prerequisites are to starting, Quiver recommendations for how this is going to fit in with your existing boards, new boards, and wings, as well as a review of the BRM versus the Flow Parawings. So the two main use cases I see for the Parawing are a dedicated downwind tool, just like downwind sups, or a upwind, downwind, free ride wave experience like we get with winging. Of course, there's also kind of prone assist where you can use it to ride breaking waves close to shore. Guys are doing freestyle and free race on these things, but for me, I want to focus on the upwind, downwind side of things because that's what I see as the most novel and exciting thing that has get most of us in the community really fired up on the Parawing. I think winging has really opened up a lot of water sports folks' minds to, the purity and joy that can come from chasing swell downwind and just riding and tapping into that energy and feeling that with the foil. So to enable that, we've got foils and boards rapidly becoming more and more efficient over the last few years. And funny enough, that's enabled us to have less efficient equipment as far as capturing the wind because of the advancements in those boards and foils themselves. And I see parawinging as just kind of another leap in this direction. I think kiting is actually a great example of this. In my mind anyway, a kite is way more dynamic and fun to fly than a wing. And if I lived in a flat water spot, I could easily see myself choosing kite foiling over winging. But the second you add any bit of swell to the mix, I'm going winging hands down. The ability to flag out the wing and focus purely on riding waves versus managing line tension and flying the kite and getting kind of pulled off the wave constantly is just a no-brainer. It's just what I want to do is hook into that swell, and I think I speak for a lot of folks. Winging that is what we're after. That's the feeling we're after. The other advantage of winging over kite foiling is the ease of setup and access to all sorts of other locations where you'd never dream of launching a kite. It's also, I would say, safer. When you get out there, you've got this big floaty board that you can paddle in on if you pop a bladder or something happens, or if the wind just dies out, you can paddle it back in. And if the wind comes back up, you just grab your wing and go back in. With kiting, it's a lot more complicated with those lines coming into the water. So parawinging is like this, but even more so. I keep my wing rigged like this. So my setup is literally just grab it from the car and clip it around my waist and I'm ready to go. Now, like a wing, but even more so, I can get in any beach, sharp, nasty rocks because I'm just carrying my board and foil. And if there's shore pound, it's much easier to get through without having to deal with a wing and a leash and potentially getting that wrapped around you. So it makes access so much easier. And plus, because we're generally on a longer, narrower board, it's even faster to paddle in, not to mention you're not dragging a wing behind you. So that all sounds great, but what are the downsides? Well, the first thing I think is just ease of use. They're harder to use than wings, harder to learn. And the second, and probably less obvious, is range. This 3 meter, because it can't sign like a kite or it can't pump as effectively as a wing, you really limit your low end. And then secondly, compared to a kite or a wing, they just have less high end. When you're flying that really strong gusty wind, they're rather unpleasant to ride with, and I would say become almost impossible to go upwind. So this is why we're seeing a lot of people embrace the downwind sup boards with the Parawing to just mitigate that low end you have with these wings, and so that you don't have to basically use a 4 meter to get going, and as soon as you're trying to ride upwind, you're feeling overpowered. A downwind sup will help increase that range of your smaller Parawings in your quiver. The downside though is those boards are actually quite technical to learn because they're so tracky, and then even when you're up and riding them, they're not as fun as a smaller board. Certainly the pros can make them look really good, but for most of us out there, we're gonna have a lot more fun carving around on a smaller board. This is where I deviate from the norm a little bit, and I think it might be helpful for those of you out there who are looking to pick up their first Parawing. As background, I've always had a 3, 4, and 5 meter inflatable wing, Quiver I really like, with the 4 meter being used 80% of my sessions, anything from kind of 16 to 27 knots. I love that 4 meter and I've had the best days on it. That is where I think are the prime conditions for parawing, and that's why the 3 meter parawing has replaced my 4 meter wing. When I pick out new wings this spring, I'm really just gonna be looking for a 2.5 and a 5. I want the 2.5 for those crazy storm days when I don't wanna be dealing with a parawing like madly flapping around. And then I want the 5 because I really enjoy that 5 meter for super light days when you're just kind of dancing around and tacking and playing with tiny little swell. I don't need to be dealing with a big parawing and a big board in 13 knots and, you know, packing that thing and madly pumping in tiny little swell and then redeploying it. It's just, for me, I've been messing around with that a bit and I just don't feel like it's worth it. I really like the light wind winging with those small waves. So it's just not where I see the value in the parawing. Additionally, once you've started playing with these parawings, a 4 meter parawing didn't sound very big to me, but in the water when it's wet and to relaunch it, it feels big. Like I never thought my 4 meter hand wing was too big, but the 4 meter parawing feels really big. So take that into account, especially if you're a smaller person and don't have a long reach. They're a lot bigger to handle than you might think and awkward in the water. With the 3 meter parawing integrated into my quiver, I might also add the 4.2, even though I don't think it's strictly necessary. I don't see parawing as a replacement for winging, just a different version for when the conditions are really great. I do, however, see it as a replacement for downwind sup. I used to really want to learn to downwind sup. I just knew, based on the logistics and our coastline and our traffic and just my life, that if I took it up, I would really decrease the time I spent on foil and time I spent on the water in favor of a lot of driving around. So it just never made sense for me. But I have to say, since getting the parawing, my desire to downwind sup has gone to 0. So it's completely replaced that in my mind. And I feel pretty darn good about being on a smaller board and smaller foil and having no paddle in my hands when I'm downwinding as well. The other thing I would say is if guys are rallying and gonna drive and do a downwind run, I just have to grab my 3 meter parawing and board and I can go along with them. So it fills that void as well, but I would say with more capability to move around and get to the best swell. So what do you need to start parawinging? Well, I had an extensive background with kite foiling and wing foiling. So for me, the transition was pretty easy. It only took me a couple minutes of messing around with it in the water to get up and on foil. And I've seen similar things from guys that I know that are athletic and only wing, have not had any kite experience. So I would definitely say winging is a prerequisite unless you really want to suffer. The other thing I would say is a prerequisite is being able to flag out and ride swell on your hand wing for 2 to 3 minutes. If you're not able to do this and you're still having to really pay attention and you're losing the swell, then I think the parawing is just not going to be an effective tool for you at that point. You're much better off, as far as even your parawing progression goes, to spend more time practicing flagging out on your wing in order to make the best use of the parawing. So if you're in that situation with winging, you're struggling to flag out for more than a couple minutes, but you really want to learn to parawing, thing I'd recommend most is to just stop relying on your wing as a crutch when you flag out. I've given this advice before, but I'll reiterate because I think I've seen it be incredibly effective at people upping their time on foil, is just flag out and then go until you come off foil. So whether you're pumping or riding swell, just stay on foil or fall. Don't use your wing as a crutch. You'll be shocked at how quickly you can increase your time on foil using this technique. There's so many times when you think you need your wing, but you can pump through it or you can find energy somewhere in the ocean. If you're looking for a board specifically to learn to parawing, our Supermarines have been quite popular for this reason. They have a unique combination of high efficiency while still maintaining good ease of use and balance. to make slogging and while you're getting used to the handling of that Parawing a lot easier. The other thing is they have the light wind ability without the compromise of a full downwind sup. So you've still got like a nice surfy, cruisy feel, a board that you can pump and turn quite well with those bigger sizes and pushing those light winds so you can get out on the Parawing more. Now my Quiver is a little bit different. I've got two boards that live in my roof box full time. They only come out to foil, and that's the 44 Emissary and the 66 Emissary. So the 44 is my prone board and good conditions wing foil board. And the 66 is what I use for light wind winging or when it's really shallow, kind of small surf for prone foiling. And then of course for parawinging in that kind of middle good condition range. So no doubt at my weight of just over 180 pounds, I'd be better off for an all-round parawing board with the 78-liter Emissary. But that being said, I really feel like I'm getting the best of both worlds with the 66, having a dedicated light wind winging board, as well as a smaller, more compact, more fun parawing board. Here's a good example of the lower end of my 66-liter and 3-meter parawing combination. I'm really not recommending going this small with your board unless you're already an accomplished winger and really resonate with keeping your inflatable wings for those lighter wind days. As well as having a really efficient board like the Emissary that's purpose-built to accelerate up to foiling speed with the lowest possible energy. You can see I'm pumping the wing really aggressively here. I should actually be focusing more on pumping the board, which is a more effective technique with the Parawing. We'll get into that in a later video, so subscribe for that update. And again, I'll reiterate, if you're looking to learn Parawing, the Supermarine is just gonna make that process so much easier. And for advanced riders, upping your volume to just under body weight in kilograms will get you considerably better low end. Onto the wings themselves. The 3-meter flow has been a game changer for me. Since getting this, I feel way more comfortable riding it. I've got a much bigger wind range. I'm cranking way harder upwind, and I get a lot more consistent redeploys, and I find it much easier to untangle because of the color-coded lines and color-coded leading edge. So all around, it's been quite a big improvement in my parawinging experience. The one downside I would say about this is the material's a little bit more crinkly than the BRM, so it packs down a touch bigger. So if you're exclusively using your Parawing for downwind riding and you're using bigger Parawings to enable that kind of like light wind starting, then I could see the argument for getting something that packs down smaller. But for me with the 3, it's been totally fine. It hasn't been a problem. More into detail on the Parawings. Foil Rat on YouTube has some great detailed breakdowns of the various options available. He's actually why I got this flow. So thank you, Foil Rat, for helping me out there. So yeah, check out his channel. The other guys you can talk to are Tucker and the team at MacKite. I know they've been testing a bunch of different Parawings, so they've got some great analysis and of course the inside scoop on what's coming out next. So give them a shout if you have questions. The other thing I wanted to mention is the harness. So I think this was a Greg from Board Riding Maui invention, along with the kind of upwind, downwind parawinging in general. So thank you, Greg, for that awesome idea. This harness is great. Like, it's pretty simple, but it's really clean, and in practice, like, I could almost not see myself parawinging without it. It's so nice to be able to hook into the parawing, take that pressure off your hands when you're going upwind, and then have a place to pack down the parawing and get rid of it. It does take some skill to pack it down, but in my mind, it's well worth learning. The last little accessory item is this harness hook from Jim Stringfellow. He CNCs these custom. I actually lost the proper hook for this, but I found that this is far superior to having to use the windsurfing style that we're using for winging. Being able to just hook onto the bar is just way better. As always, I love hearing from the foiling community in the comments of our videos, but especially with Parawing, where this is such a new thing and we're heading into spring here where people are looking to make their decisions for summer equipment and how they're going to spend their summers chasing waves and wind. So if you've already had some time on the Parawing, then I'd really appreciate if you could post how long it took you to learn, what your background is going into it, and what were the wrong choices you made in gear and what were the right choices. If we can get a bunch of kind of real world experience down there from a variety of skill levels, I think it's gonna really help those on the fence make up their mind of whether this is the right thing for them or where they should hold off and keep training with the wing. Thanks for watching this video. Check out our gear at omanfoils.com and I hope to see you on the water.